She walked into millions of homes every single morning, not as a stranger, not as a face you half recognize from a billboard or a magazine cover, but as someone who genuinely felt like a friend, the kind who pulls up a chair at your kitchen table, laughs a little too loudly, cries without any apology, and somehow makes the weight of the world feel just a little bit lighter before the day has even really begun. For years, that was Hoda Kotb, warm in a way that can't be faked, steady in a way that felt almost impossible given everything life had already thrown at her. Real in an industry that quietly punishes realness and rewards the performance of it. And then, just like that, the news broke. It didn't arrive with sirens. It never does, not the kind that matters. It came the way all truly difficult things tend to arrive. Quietly, a headline, a notification. A sentence that didn't quite land the first time you read it, so you read it again, and then once more. Because your mind was doing what minds do when something feels wrong, it was searching for a different interpretation. A less heavy one that would let you exhale, but there wasn't one. Fans stopped mid-scroll. Comments poured in from people across the world, people who had never been in the same room as this woman, who had only ever known her through glass and pixels, and the soft blue light of a morning television screen. And yet they felt it, something shifted, something that sat quietly in the chest and didn't move. That particular ache that doesn't make logical sense until you sit with it long enough to understand this person mattered to you. Not because you decided she would, but because over time she simply did. What happened exactly? What does any of this mean for someone who has already walked through so much? And why does this moment, out of all the difficult moments that have come before, feel so different? So final somehow, even when nothing has been declared final, the answers aren't clean. They aren't simple. They rarely are when the story belongs to someone who has spent her entire life refusing to be anything less than fully, honestly human. There is something quietly deceptive about the way Hoda Kotb has always carried herself in public. She smiles easily, not the practiced smile of someone performing warmth, but the kind that starts in the eyes before the mouth even moves. She listens with her entire body. She asks questions that feel like they come from genuine curiosity, because they do. And in an industry built almost entirely on image management and careful distance, she somehow built a decades-long career on doing the opposite of all of that. On being as completely as television allows exactly who she is. But that ease, that warmth, that seemingly effortless openness, none of it came from a life that was easy. Hoda was born in Norman, Oklahoma, to Egyptian parents who had left their home country and rebuilt their lives on foreign soil, carrying with them the particular mix of grief and hope that belongs to people who have chosen a new beginning. Her childhood was one of movement, new cities, new schools, new versions of what home was supposed to mean. She learned early, the way children who move a lot always do, that belonging is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you build, deliberately, patiently. Sometimes from almost nothing. She found journalism at Virginia Tech, and it was clear from the beginning that she wasn't chasing a career in the conventional sense. She was chasing something to say. Something to give. She wanted to be close to the stories that mattered, not reporting them from a safe remove, but sitting inside them, feeling the weight of them, and then carrying them back to the people who needed to hear them. Her early years in local news were unglamorous, and deliberately so. Long hours, small markets, stories that never reached national headlines but meant everything to the people they were about. And through all of it, she was quietly developing something that can't be taught in any journalism program: the ability to make another person feel, through a screen, that they are not alone. By the time she joined NBC News and eventually found her place on the Today Show, she had already lived enough to understand something most people spend their whole careers pretending they don't know. That the stories people most desperately need are rarely the loud ones. They are the quiet ones, the ones buried in the spaces between the breaking news alerts and the celebrity interviews. The ones that whisper rather than shout. And then came 2006, a single word, a diagnosis: breast cancer, that arrives in a life like a door slamming shut on everything you thought came next. It would have silenced a lot of people. It would have sent a lot of people inward into the private dark, away from cameras and questions and the relentless exposure of public life. But Hoda did not go quiet. She did not disappear. She went through the surgery, the treatment, the long and disorienting work of rebuilding a sense of self on the other side of something that tries, in every way it knows how, to take that self apart. And when she came back changed. Not smaller, fuller somehow, deeper in places that only pain can reach, her viewers could feel that change without being able to name it. She spoke about fear without softening its edges. She spoke about gratitude without inflating it into something performative. She became, in the truest sense, someone who had looked at the fragility of her own life with clear eyes and chosen, deliberately, to keep showing up anyway. That is the woman the world thought it knew. That is the woman these recent reports are now asking us to look at differently. For a long time, it genuinely seemed like Hoda Kotb had reached a kind of arrival. Not the glossy, surface-level kind that celebrity culture promises. Something quieter and more real than that. The kind of arrival that belongs to a person who has walked through fire and come out the other side still holding something worth keeping. Her partnership with Kathy Lee Gifford on the Today Show had grown into something that audiences genuinely treasured. Their chemistry wasn't manufactured in a production meeting. It was the living, breathing kind that forms between two people who actually enjoy each other's company, who make each other laugh in ways no writer could predict, who are honest with each other in ways that television rarely permits. When Cassie Lee eventually stepped away, the question of whether that energy could survive her absence was real. It could, it found new form, it kept going. And then in her personal life, something quietly extraordinary happened. In 2017, Hoda adopted her first daughter, Haley Joy. She was in her early 50s. She was not in a relationship that had produced this child. She simply decided, with the particular clarity of someone who has survived enough to know what actually matters, that family does not wait for perfect circumstances. That love doesn't operate on a timeline. That a child who needs a home and a woman who has room in her heart are sufficient, full stop. 2 years later, she adopted again. A second daughter, Hope Catherine. And the way she talked about those two little girls, not as chapter headings in her public story, but as the actual gravitational center of her life, told you something about who she was when the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights went dark. Her engagement to Joel Skiffman in 2019 completed a picture that, from the outside, looked like the natural reward of a life lived with persistence and grace. Through illness, through loss. Through the long, patient work of building and rebuilding. Through choosing, over and over again, to stay open when the easier and safer choice would have been to close. But pictures are always partial. That's the thing about them that we keep forgetting. They show you the frame, they don't show you everything that lives just outside it. Beneath all of that warmth, beneath the stability and the grace and the image of a life that had finally found its footing, things were already beginning to shift. Quietly. In ways that wouldn't become clear until much later. It started as so many real changes do, with something that looked from the outside like a practical decision, and felt from the inside like something far more complicated. In early 2023, Hoda announced that her engagement to Joel Skiffman had ended. The statement she gave was careful, measured. It had the particular tone of someone who has thought at length about what to say, and has chosen, with intention, to say only what is absolutely necessary. They would continue to co-parent their daughters with love and commitment. The family would remain intact. Its shape had simply changed. The public received the news with sympathy, largely because Hoda herself kept the conversation so restrained. She did not offer her pain up as content. She did not perform heartbreak for the audience that had loved her for so long. And in doing that, she made a quiet, dignified statement about the difference between what is shared and what is sacred, even for someone whose entire career has been built on openness. But the more closely people watched, the harder it became to shake the feeling that this was not a story that had finished being told. On screen, she was still Hoda, present, engaged, smiling. But there were moments, brief and almost hidden, where something heavier moved through her expression. A pause that lasted a half-second too long. A stillness behind the eyes that belonged to a different kind of weather than the one she was presenting. The people who had watched her long enough could feel it, even if they couldn't quite articulate what they were feeling. And then came an announcement that stopped people in a way that none of the earlier news had managed to. After more than 2 decades with NBC. After the morning show, the book clubs, the interviews, the tears, the laughter, the long, steady daily act of showing up and giving something real to the people watching from home, Hoda Kotb announced she was leaving the Today Show. It was her choice, she said, intentional, a movement toward something new even if that something new had not yet taken shape or been named. The questions that followed were inevitable. And they were still circling, still unresolved, when the news arrived that none of her fans were prepared for. January 10, 2025 became a date that lodged itself in the minds of people who hadn't expected it to. That was the day Hoda said her final goodbye from the Today Show. And her farewell was exactly what you would expect from someone who had spent 17 years mastering the quiet art of honest emotion on live television. There were tears. Real tears, the kind that move through an audience not because sadness travels like a cold, but because watching someone you have trusted for years feel something genuinely, without flinching, reaches past all the careful distance you've constructed between yourself and your television screen. Her colleagues surrounded her, her daughters were there. And Hoda stood at the center of all of it with a particular kind of grace. The grace of someone who has fully accepted a decision while still, quietly, mourning what that decision costs. 17 years, think about what that actually means. Not in television terms but in human ones, 17 years is a childhood, it is a marriage. It is the length of time it takes for a baby to become old enough to leave home. For Hoda, it was the structure around which her days were built, her purpose was expressed. Her identity was shaped in ways so gradual and so complete that she may not have been fully aware of how deep the roots had grown until the day she had to pull them up. The response from the public was enormous. Social media became, briefly, something other than noise, filled instead with specific, tender remembrances from viewers who recalled particular segments, particular interviews, particular moments where Hoda said something that landed in a precise and unexpected place and shifted something small but permanent inside them. But underneath the tributes there were questions about what comes next, about whether the departure was truly, entirely, in every dimension voluntary, about what happens to a person whose deepest sense of purpose has always been tied to presence, to connection, to the daily act of showing up, when the stage for that purpose is suddenly, completely gone. Those questions were still unresolved when the reports began to surface. And when they did, the concern that had been building quietly in the people who followed her story became something more immediate and more difficult to set aside. According to reports that have emerged in the period following her departure, Hoda has been navigating a chapter of genuine personal difficulty. Those who have been described as close to the situation have spoken carefully, in the way people speak when they want to say something true without saying more than they have the right to say. What they have described is not simply the adjustment of a professional transition. It is the accumulated weight of multiple significant losses arriving in a relatively short window of time. The end of a long engagement, the conclusion of a defining career, the ongoing daily reality of raising two young daughters largely alone. Layered together, according to those sources, these things have created a kind of pressure that even the most resilient person would struggle to absorb without something bending. There are reports, offered with evident care by the people sharing them, of health concerns that those around her have been watching closely. No official statement has been made. No confirmed diagnosis has been shared publicly. But the pattern of withdrawn appearances, the quieter public profile, and the particular texture of the words chosen by people who clearly care about her, have added up to a picture that her most attentive followers have not missed. This is not rumor presented as fact. No official conclusion has been reached, and questions remain that only Hoda and the people closest to her can fully answer. What can be said with confidence is that the woman who spent 20 years showing up to help other people carry their weight is now in a season of life where the most important and most difficult work she may have ever been asked to do is simply this: to let herself be carried too. And the people watching, the ones who have been with her since the beginning, are doing the only thing they can from a distance. They are waiting, they are hoping. And they are holding her, in whatever small and imperfect way that holding someone through a screen allows. There is a particular kind of difficulty that belongs specifically to people who have lived their lives publicly. It has no clean name, but anyone who has watched it happen to someone they admire will recognize it immediately. On one side, there is the enormous, genuine comfort of public love. The messages that pour in, the prayers from strangers. The knowledge that your presence has mattered, that your voice found its way into the lives of people you have never met and changed something there, however small. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, one of the more sustaining forms of human connection available to us. But on the other side, there is the weight that comes with it. The weight of being watched even when you are trying desperately to simply heal, every absence analyzed, every silence interpreted, every carefully chosen word examined for what it chose not to say. The scrutiny does not soften because you are hurting. If anything, it sharpens. Hoda has demonstrated, across her entire public life, an unusual and hard-won ability to hold both of those realities at the same time. To give generously in public while protecting fiercely in private. She did it through her cancer diagnosis, when she spoke about fear honestly but kept the deepest parts of that experience close. She did it through the end of her engagement, when she acknowledged the change without turning the pain of it into a spectacle. And she has been doing it by all accounts through this season too. But something about this particular moment feels different. Something even her most composed public appearances haven't been able to fully contain. She is a mother now. That fact sits at the center of everything. Two small girls who are learning every single day by watching her, not the version of her that appears on television, but the one who makes breakfast and reads bedtime stories and wakes up at 3 in the morning and faces, in the ordinary private dark, whatever it is she is currently facing. They are old enough to sense weight, even if they cannot name it. And everything Hoda does in this season, every choice she makes about how to meet what is hard, is, whether she thinks of it this way or not, a lesson. A real one given in real time, without any of the safety nets that a television format provides. She is teaching them what endurance looks like when it isn't pretty. What asking for help looks like when you have spent your whole life being the one who does the helping. What it means to be a strong woman who is also undeniably having a hard time and who does not pretend otherwise for the sake of appearances. That is not a small lesson. That may in fact be the most important thing she has ever taught, and she is teaching it without an audience, without cameras, without the structure and the rhythm and the familiar comfort of a format she inhabited for 17 years. The people who love her, all of them, whether they have ever been in the same room as her or not, are watching with a quieter, more careful kind of attention now. Not the attention that waits for something to happen, the attention that simply hopes. There is something in all of this that deserves more than a news cycle. More than a headline in a comment section and the brief, bright flare of public attention before it moves on to the next thing. Hoda Kotb built her life on a single, quietly radical idea. That human connection is not secondary to a meaningful life. It is the point of it. That vulnerability shared honestly is not a weakness but a gift. That what people will remember about you, long after the specific words have faded, is whether or not they felt less alone in your company. Every real interview she gave. Every tear she didn't bother to wipe away before the camera could catch it. Every time she spoke about her daughters with the kind of uncensored love that makes polished television look, by comparison, like something hollow, all of it was an argument. A long, sustained, quietly powerful argument for a way of being in the world that most of the world has been trained to be suspicious of. And now that argument is being tested in the most intimate and private way it can be tested. None of us knows fully what she is carrying right now. We have fragments, reports. The careful words of people who care about her and have chosen to say just enough. But the whole of it, the real texture of what this season feels like from inside her life, belongs to her. To her and her daughters and the small, trusted circle she has kept close. What we can say with complete honesty is this. The woman who gave 20 years of herself to the project of making other people feel seen and held and less alone, deserves, now more than perhaps ever before, to not feel alone herself. The particular grief that fans carry when someone they have admired for a long time faces something genuinely hard is sometimes dismissed, called parasocial, called an illusion, called a relationship that was never really real because it only ever moved in one direction. But that dismissal misses something. The connection that built itself over years between Hoda Kotb and the people who watched her is not simply a projection. It was constructed from real material. Her actual words, her actual emotions, her actual experiences, shared through a medium that, at its best and most honest, closes the distance between one human life and another. When that person hurts, the concern is real too. It comes from a real place. It deserves to be named as such. She once said, in one of those unscripted, unrehearsed moments that tend to outlast anything carefully planned, that the secret to surviving hard things is simply to keep moving. Not running away from them, not pretending they aren't happening, just moving. One day, one step, one quiet act of choosing to continue at a time. She has lived that, she knows what it costs. She knows better than most what it looks like from the inside, the unglamorous, unseeing, sometimes barely moving at all inside. And she has come through before, not unscathed, but intact. Carrying something she didn't have before she went in, there is every reason to believe she will again. Not because life is fair or because good people are protected from hard chapters, but because of the evidence. The long, visible, honest record of who Hoda Kotb has shown herself to be when things get difficult. But right now, she is in the middle of it. And the middle, as anyone who has ever been there knows, is the part that doesn't yet have a view of the other side. It is the part that simply has to be lived through, day by day, quietly. Without knowing yet how it ends, that is where she is. And the least the rest of us can do is remember her there with something gentler than curiosity and something more patient than concern. With the simple, steady hope that she finds her way through. If this story moved something in you, if Hoda's journey has meant something across the years, take a moment to leave a thought in the comments. Not analysis, not debate. Just whatever honestly came up for you while you were here. Stories like this one matter because the people inside them matter. And the people we invite into our lives, even through a screen, deserve to be remembered with the same care they gave us. If this felt worth your time, consider subscribing. These stories are told slowly and with care because that is the only way they deserve to be told. And wherever Hoda is right now, we are thinking of her.